Hi everyone. This is Katie with WREN. We're so excited to see you guys just shuffling on in. We're probably going to get started at like 1:03-ish just to give some people some time. But until then, sit tight, get a drink and a snack, and we'll see you soon. Hi, everyone. So we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Katie DeTilio. I'm the Senior Legislative Affairs Associate for the Women's Rights and Empowerment Network. And I am joined by the wonderful Lynn Teague, the VP for Issues at the League of Women Voters. Thank you for being with
Happy
us.
to be here today.
And also, I want to make sure I highlight our Zoom bouncer, the wonderful Brianna Myers, our Director of Finance. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, you will be talking to the wonderful Bree, and she'll help you the best she can. And yeah, we're going to go ahead and get started on what just happened. That something really fast happened at the end of May
Yes,
and the beginning of June. Well, I guess it was done by the beginning of June. That's how fast it was. So we're gonna break down redistricting. Are you ready,
I
Lynn?
think I'm ready to wade through this.
Yeah, it's definitely waiting. All right, we're gonna go off camera and go ahead and get started. All right, so yeah, what just happened? We're gonna break down South Carolina's redistricting battle. Um, just before we go any further, I'm going to do just a little bit of light Zoom housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded, and chat may only be used by co-hosts to share important links, contact information, and so forth. That was our Zoom bouncer, Bree. She'll be sharing that information and corresponding with you. Audience members can submit questions. There's at the bottom of your screen on the black bar, there is a little Q&A box. You can go ahead and click that and enter in your question, and we'll answer them at the end of the webinar. And there are also live captions available, same black box on the bottom of your screen. And with that, we're going to go just high level. Well, actually, wait, I forgot the order of my own presentation. Lynn, Why don't you tell us a little bit about you? Again, so happy to have you.
Oh, thank you. Yes, we've got your bio up there. Everybody can read it. But basically, I was a professional archaeologist for many decades. When I retired, I returned home to South Carolina. I'm a 13th generation South Carolinian, so not a novel place for me in retirement.
Mhm.
And got involved with the League of Women Voters. And we, of course, are an organization that's been around for a while. And when I joined it, I found I was quickly thrown in the deep end of the pool,
Right.
dealing with the State House. And so I've been at the State House now for the League for 14 years.
That was going to be my question. I was like, how long?
Hmm.
Yeah, that's definitely a deep pool, the State
Yeah.
House. Thank you again. We're so excited to have you. And I can't wait for the audience to hear like Lynn is so knowledgeable. I'm so excited. And that brings it to me. Again, my name is Katie DiTilio. I'm the Senior Legislative Affairs Associate for WREN. In December, it'll be about 2 years, which is crazy to think. I feel like I just started. But I work on our policy development, legislative analysis, and I'm also a registered lobbyist for the org at the State House. So with that, we're gonna now look at our presentation objectives. So we're gonna start with who we are. If you're not familiar with the League of Women Voters, if you're not familiar with WREN, first of all, hello. And we're gonna introduce ourselves. Then we're gonna kind of do some level setting with what is redistricting, right? What do we mean when that we talk about that? Next, we're going to talk about the Louisiana versus Callais case and what that means for the Voters' Rights Act. Goodness. Um, and then South Carolina's special session, specifically the redistricting portion of it. It's important to note that that was not the only reason they were called back in. And then we'll talk resources and questions. So with that, we're gonna jump in with who are we? And Lynn, would you like to start us off with the league?
Sure. The League of Women Voters was founded in 1920 at the time that the 19th Amendment gave women the vote. And the whole purpose of the League, founded by people who had been suffragists working for the vote for women, was to make sure that women were engaged, active, and well informed. And we have since expanded our mission to include even people who are not women. We have very pleased to have some wonderful men in our group,
Mhm.
but our mission remains helping to inform people about how our democracy is supposed to work, how they can participate, encourage them to participate, help them vote. We have voter services. Many of you have seen registration tables manned by our local league folks. And, um, and we advocate at the State House from the state league position. Our National League advocates in Congress. And our local leagues advocate in county councils and city councils.
Anywhere voting decisions are happening, the league
Yes,
is around and they're watching.
and
Mhm.
we have broad interest,
Yes.
environmental, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, and so forth.
Mhm.
Voting and elections and redistricting are central to us
Mhm.
precisely because they underlie successfully dealing with any of these other issues.
Right. If you can't access the right to vote, you can't vote for people who are going to make the changes that we need to see.
Right,
And you talked a little bit about, so it's the center is this voting access, right?
right.
But that it bleeds into these other policy positions. So I outlined some of those here. Do you want to talk about some of them?
Just very briefly, I actually have help from two wonderful other folks. Janelle Rivers and Lynn Hammond work on public education at the State House for us. And because public education, of course, is central to any sort of reasonable representative democracy.
Mhm.
Um, and effective local government, accountable government, encourage informed, active citizen participation, environmental stewardship and sustainable growth. We're very involved in the data center issues around energy, both from environmental and ratepayer equity points of view. And we also get involved in issues like healthcare,
Mhm.
equitable access to the health care that the people of South Carolina need.
It's a nice swath of issues,
Hmm.
and I like the effective local government one personally,
Mhm.
if I had to pick a favorite, right?
Mhm.
Just when I was, I feel like I meet a lot of people who don't even think about that, like very direct run. I had a friend tell me I don't care about state politics, only federal, which is insane to me because these local and state policies are what shape your everyday life,
Right,
right?
right.
But we're happy to have the league beside us most of the time and most of the issues, right?
Mhm.
I mean, I would say most, it's probably usually
And
always.
we're never
Yeah.
opposed,
No, we're
but
never,
we sometimes have different focus.
yeah, no, we're usually on the same parallel.
Mhm.
But um, let's talk a little bit about Ren, who we are. If this is the first time you're interacting with us, again, welcome. I'm glad you found your way to this webinar. Ren's mission is to advocate, educate, research, and convene community and service to women and girls for a more equitable South Carolina. I have it broken out in those pillars here. So advocate, we're actively engaging in efforts to promote policies that support economic justice and reproductive freedom. I'm going to get into a little bit what we mean when we say those two phrases, but advocacy looks a lot of different ways. We're writing op-eds, we're at the State House, we're going out into community, which kind of falls into these other pieces, right? So educate, things like putting on a webinar like this, right? Research, if you haven't had a chance to read our Status of Women and Girls report, I'm going to plug it now. It's a love letter to the state of South Carolina, breaking out all the counties, letting us know where we are and where we can go. It is linked on our website. And then convene, right? So if you've seen us in community, you've probably seen Aisha absolutely killing it out there with her bubbly personality, letting you guys know about our issues and how you can get involved. So nice to meet you. We're the Women's Rights and Empowerment Network. I mentioned our legislative priorities, which are economic justice and reproductive freedom. What we mean when we say economic justice is that everyone should have a fair chance to live a good life, is how I simplify it, whatever that looks like. You should be able to live the life that you want to live with the resources that you can access, right? Like we want to make sure everyone has a chance to do that. So our key policies are childcare, right? Paid family leave, which I'm gonna plug real quick that the House and Senate are meeting today, and we're hoping that one of our paid leave bills gets its conference committee today. So fingers crossed. And if you hear me go woohoo off to the side, that's what happened. And also workplace non-discrimination. And then reproductive freedom, that's ensuring that people have access to the full range of healthcare services. So a lot of the time when we say reproductive freedom, immediately people think about access to abortion, which is important and that is healthcare, but it also includes access to IVF, improving access to doula and lactation services, maternal health services, everything surrounding any healthcare choice that you would need to make, right? So this is the league. This is Ren, and we are so excited to teach you about redistricting. Um, Lynn, you're our expert here. So I have a definition. It's just
Mhm.
redrawing the boundaries to
Mhm.
reflect changes in population and representation.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about why that happens and like why it's so important that it happens?
It is a basic part of the U.S. Constitution. Article 2 requires that the census be done. Now, today, the census is very important for a lot of reasons, including distribution of um, federal assistance for people in poverty, education issues, and so forth. But it is most importantly used to redistrict. When you hear the House of Representatives, that should tell you something. The name is intended to show that it is to represent the people. And to do that accurately, our founders actually figured out that they couldn't just draw lines and forget it. They had to review it every 10 years. They didn't prohibit reviewing it more often, which it turns out may be a problem, but,
Yeah.
but they do require it every 10 years. Census data determines how representation is allocated. Um, and helps ensure that officials represent roughly equal numbers of people. But it isn't just numbers. It is about changes in population communities, changes in economics, changes in transportation. There are all sorts of things that can affect how redistricting is done. Some of them appropriate, some of them not so good.
And we're actually going to talk about some of those like traditional
Mhm.
redistricting rules,
Mhm.
guidelines. So let's look at some of those. So we have on here equal population,
Mhm.
compact and connected districts,
Mhm.
and then keeping those communities together.
Right.
Um,
And defining those communities can be very complex.
mhm,
We filed an amicus brief in the NAACP case, federal
mhm.
case on CD1, and the League's amicus brief focused on the economic role of the Port of Charleston as opposed to the very different economic basis of many of the areas that are now included in CD1 and putting CD1 and CD6, splitting them as they did, how that split communities.
That was something I noticed with this new map too, like having Richland carved the
Mhm.
way it was, is upsetting.
There are two things that are the rough slang is packing and cracking.
And
And
cracking.
what ways to manipulate district definition. And packing is when you take people and pile them into one district because you want to minimize their impact on adjacent districts. Cracking is when you know you have a substantial population somewhere and you don't want them being able to vote in someone that they prefer. Contrary to the intent of the Constitution, you
Mhm.
want to split them up so they're a minority in every district they appear in. For that reason, when you see a gerrymandered map of the state of South Carolina, you usually see Columbia and Charleston split.
Hmm.
And that is cracking. That is intentional cracking
Cracking.
of what are normally inclined to vote Democratic
Mhm.
areas. The League of Women Voters, like WREN, of course, is nonpartisan, but
Mhm.
we believe in protecting the interest of all the people, regardless of what party they prefer. This cracking prevents people from, in fact, electing someone of the party they prefer.
That truly
And
represents their
yeah,
area.
and we also have this compact. Compact is hard to define. I think the software that's used in defining districts provides, I think I forgot whether it's 7 or 9 different ways to define that. Connected, you shouldn't have to jump to go through another district to get to a part of the same district. Unfortunately, that includes contiguous by water. CD1 and Congressional District 1 in South Carolina is only contiguous by water.
Oh.
And that means they're taking the Atlantic Ocean
Oh.
as grounds for connecting CD1 because all of the Charleston Peninsula is in CD6, everything north of it, everything south of it. If you're
Mhm.
going to drive from the north part to the south part of CD1, you have to drive through CD6. Um, Now, you could extend this indefinitely. You could say that the London docks are connected by water
Right.
to Mount Pleasant. They are.
Right.
Ships used to sail out of Shem Creek shipyards to
Right.
the London.
Right. That's not
Yeah,
necessarily compact
but
or connected.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
not compact,
Yeah.
and it's a distortion.
You mentioned the word gerrymandered. What
Mhm.
does gerrymandered mean?
Okay, gerrymandered is when these district redistricting principles are distorted in
Mhm.
the interest of a party or in the interest of incumbents, and both are very common. And frankly, the maps we have right now in South Carolina are undeniably gerrymandered. I know that one of the people I saw that signed up for this, in fact, ran the statistical test of gerrymandering, Matt Salzman, thank you, for the league on the existing maps and found, for example, that out of 11.8 billion simulations of our House of South Carolina House map, only 407 were more biased than the one that was adopted by the General Assembly.
Whoa.
Um, so gerrymandering uh, is intended to to muffle the voices of some voters, to amplify the voices of other voters, to suit the interests of incumbents and parties.
I thank you for that definition. I feel like when I was in school learning about gerrymandering, everyone told me like how bad it was. They're like,
Hmm.
you should not gerrymander, and just how commonplace and open it's
Hmm.
talked about.
Yeah,
I feel like sometimes it's forgotten. It's like not should it shouldn't be the norm. We shouldn't just be gerrymandering all the time.
no.
Um, and I think we kind of touched, yeah, so no gerrymandering.
Right. Well, that's the League is of Women Voters
Mhm.
and REN are
Yeah,
opposed to gerrymandering.
yeah.
We believe that districts should be drawn for voters, not for parties, not for incumbents. Unfortunately, the United States is the only developed nation in the world where legislators draw their own maps. And human nature is such
Mhm.
that all of them, both major parties, are
Mhm.
happy to participate in a level of gerrymandering. Someone in a minority party can have more of their voters crammed into their district, packed into their district, making their campaigning easier at the expense of giving their party less of a chance in adjacent districts and making at the same time the work of those campaigning in those adjacent districts occupied by the other party easier.
Yeah.
Their job becomes easier. And we also believe it should be transparent and accountable. We know that there are a lot of public meetings held in accounting in
Mhm.
most redistricting, not so much what just happened,
Mhm.
but
Right, right.
but in the major ones. Unfortunately, then the question becomes how much is the public input actually respected?
Mhm.
And the answer in South Carolina in the most recent major redistricting was not as nearly as much as it should have been.
Right.
And of course, fair representation. Maps should not be designed to weaken the voices of minority communities. South Carolina, um, has a long, long history of weakening the voices of minority communities. Um, and we don't need to keep doing that.
We shouldn't keep drawing maps to reinforce that fact.
Right, right,
When we were prepping this presentation, you gave me the guidelines from League of Women
right.
Voters, and there's a phrase on the website that sticks out to me that's voters should pick their representatives.
Mhm.
Representatives should not pick their voters.
Right,
So when we're drawing maps, that should be the guiding light, right?
right, right. That's the underlying principle. And in fact, if that were not what the Constitution intended, then why do a census every 10 years?
Right.
But unfortunately, since 2013 in Shelby, the
Hmm.
Supreme Court of the United States has made a series of decisions that have weakened the voice of voters and made gerrymandering basically a free-for-all in many ways. First, they said only racial gerrymanders will be considered.
Hmm.
Then in Alexander v. NACP, which was when the state appealed, the NACP having won in federal court that CD1 was a gerrymander, an illegal racial gerrymander. Statistics showed that that was a reasonable argument. The court agreed, went to the Supreme Court. They said, nope, nope, nope. Um, they said, no, it's a partisan gerrymander. And in accordance with their previous decisions, that meant it was a political question that they refused to adjudicate, which is uh, when this first came out in an earlier decision, one of the opposing justices in a uh, rule, said, this is a violation of one person, one vote.
Right.
But the current majority is unwilling to look at it that way.
Which we're going to talk a little bit about this current majority in the
Hmm.
Supreme Court and some decisions they've made recently.
Yeah,
Louisiana versus Calais, and what it means for the Voting Rights Act. So first, what's the Voting Rights Act?
well, it did not pass easily. It took years of work, but in 1965, the Voting Rights Act was passed, and is designed to protect Americans from discrimination in voting. Um, Article 5 for many years was construed to require pre-clearance from those states that had a history and jurisdictions within states that had a history of discrimination on the basis of race, requiring them to get DOJ approval before they could make changes. Um, The current Supreme Court threw that out years ago. Um, but that was the obvious intent of that. But Voting Rights Act is intended to prohibit discrimination in voting based on race or language minority status, protect access to registration and voting, um, basically provide the tools for challenging discrimination in elections.
Yeah, and a very, very landmark, very important piece of legislation. And so we bring it up because it has, like we said, we're trying to protect against discrimination,
Mhm.
protect voting rights. So of course it would have something to do with redistricting. It would have its hands in that. And you mentioned section 5 earlier, but now
Mhm.
section 2, this is prohibiting voting practices that would make it harder for racial and language minority groups to elect their preferred candidates. Um, Lynn, where are you bridging the connect? Like how, that's a bad question. I like had it and then I lost it.
I know where you're going,
Yeah.
which is, it's one thing to keep people from the polls.
Mhm.
I am not a young person, and I remember when people were murdered for trying to register people to vote in our
Wow.
country. This was in my lifetime. It was when I was in high school, and elementary school. Um, and the fight for equal civil rights was continuing into my early adulthood. Uh, and so there was a question, can you register? Can you vote? Are there going to be things like poll taxes that make it harder for
Mhm.
some people to vote than others? And the Voting Rights Act, along with a reasonable interpretation of Articles 14, 15 of the Constitution, would say you can't do that. You can't make it harder for somebody to cast a vote. Well, where does redistricting come in? Does that vote count equally with everybody else? Um, is your community actually having a voice? And the Voting Rights Act was there to implement those post-Civil War amendments to the Constitution by giving mechanisms for voters to challenge discriminatory election laws and district maps in court. And it had been used that way for many years, leading to major redistricting in southern states, and in 1990, major redistricting of South Carolina, which is when CD6 was defined as what it was called in colloquial usage, as the Voting Rights Act district, intended to protect minority rights. Now, it has changed in three rounds of redistricting. The question will come up when we talk about Calais. Is it racially defined today? It's not.
Mm.
But that was its original definition in 1990 was to protect the rights of racial minorities in South Carolina.
Thank you for making sense of that gobbledygook question I asked. So so I think next we are going to talk about Louisiana versus Calais.
Mhm.
Which guys, I want you to know I've been practicing Calais, saying the name. So everyone be proud of me. But this is like the high level background to how this started, right? So after the 2020 census, Louisiana adopted a congressional map with one majority Black district. Even though the population that doesn't reflect the population's
Mhm.
true makeup, right? And then a federal court at the time said this violates Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And they were like, we need you to make a second majority Black district.
Mhm.
So then Louisiana did that. It listened to the federal court, but then that map was what was challenged as an unconstitutional racial gerrymander. Um, is there anything I'm leaving out on that? Like,
No, that's basically the history.
mhm,
So then they went to our current Supreme Court,
mhm.
which, as we know, has a very different take on most citizen rights
Yeah, yeah.
than the courts have held for many decades.
So let's talk about what that court said,
Yeah.
right? They said it
Mhm.
was unconstitutional. Talk a little bit about this, Lynn.
Well, there is this pretense
Yeah.
that something like the Voting Rights Act is being used to discriminate against the racial majority, white people.
Right.
Um, as a white person, I know very well I'm not racially discriminated
No.
against. Um, But the court has held, and this is actually something that John Roberts has said throughout his entire professional career, that he did not like the Voting Rights Act. He didn't think race should ever be considered. Well, he finally got a decision, the
Mhm.
ability, a majority to do exactly that with voting, and said there was no compelling state interest demanding use of race in drawing a map and making an equitable map. In this case, especially Louisiana, in adding that second district.
Man. So that was not, this is a big blow
It's a huge blow.
to the Voting Rights Act.
Well, and it basically, the way the decision reads, it requires that you prove intent to racially discriminate. Intent is very hard to prove in most cases. We're talking here about requiring that you have um, a legally admissible record of legislators saying, I want to draw this map so that Black people do not have an equal vote.
Yeah.
Absent that kind of evidence,
Mhm.
they have made it nearly impossible to enforce the Voting Rights Act. They
Bas-
are in fact violating the obvious intent of Congress.
Right. No, I mean, it sounds like you need like a villain monologue
Right,
recorded somewhere in
right,
order to
yeah,
get this to work.
right.
Uh, And so here are some potential effects. I wanted to highlight Justice Kagan. The consequences of the court's decision are likely to be far-reaching and grave. Today's decision renders Section 2 all but a dead letter,
Hmm.
which is upsetting to say the least. So these are just some potential effects, obviously not all encompassing. I'm sure we're going to see a bunch of different ways that this is going to crop up, including how it cropped up in our own state, right? Um, so just more difficult to challenge those district maps,
Hmm.
right? The whole point was so that you could challenge the maps. Now that's harder. Increased uncertainty about how those claims will be handled. And then likely to influence redistricting across the country, which we certainly saw.
Yes.
And it'll be it's going to be good to talk about it soon.
Hmm.
Anything to add on these effects? Anything to note?
Well, as we get further into this, I think it's important to remember um, the states that have claimed they had to make changes at the last minute have done so by saying, well, under Calais, their maps are not constitutional because they're racially defined.
Mhm.
That cannot be claimed in South Carolina.
Yeah.
We have had in the Supreme Court of the United States ruled in Alexander v. NACP in 2024 that South Carolina's congressional map is not a racial gerrymander, that it is a partisan gerrymander. Now, I think there's statistical arguments to make about CD1, but the court ruled against that. Um, but in fact, you can't claim a boundary is non-racial if you're standing in on the Charleston Peninsula, but it becomes a racial gerrymander if you're looking at it from, um, from West Ashley.
Right, right.
That it won't work.
Yeah.
So we have a Supreme Court ruling that says we don't have a racial gerrymander. Calais should not apply to our congressional map. But I will also note that no Supreme Court decision has been made to that effect in the case of our state legislature.
So all that being said then, huh? Let's
Hmm.
see, it shouldn't have had an effect, but boy, it did,
Yeah.
didn't it? So let's talk about that redistricting fight. We gave all this background. We
Hmm.
have what it is, kind of like the rumblings of the start, right?
Yep.
But this wasn't the first time redistricting came up this year, right?
Right.
February 25th, Jordan Pace had a bill.
And his bill also was a map drawn in Washington, D.C.,
Mm-hmm.
with the intent of, this was long before the Calais decision came out.
Mm-hmm.
In South Carolina, the push has been very blatantly for political advantage,
Mm-hmm.
not in necessary compliance with constitutional requirements. So his bill was heard in subcommittee, in the Constitutional Law Subcommittee of the House. He had a complete map as opposed to just a bill saying there will be midterm redistricting. It, in fact, included this map drawn in DC, which was a perfectly horrible map. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I testified against it, saying it violated all the traditional criteria of protecting communities of interest and so forth. Um, but the most important testimony actually came from a Republican map drawer who
Mhm.
testified that it wouldn't do what it was intended to do, that it would raise a very high probability, because as I mentioned before, if you design some people out of one district, you're
Mhm.
putting them into another. They don't disappear.
Right.
What that means is they could end up with two competitive districts that Democrats could win. That was not what Representative Pace wanted.
No.
It was not what Republican leadership wanted. And so they heard that testimony and adjourned debate. And that was really the end of that attempt until we got later into the late spring, and the Calais decision pushed all of this back into the limelight. And South Carolina was pushed politically, even though, again, our congressional map, you cannot argue that it's a racial gerrymander legally.
Yeah, when I was explaining the start of this issue to some friends, I said, "Sound it's kind of a weird phrase, but South Carolina is already perfectly partisan gerrymandered."
Right.
And so if they were trying to do this, we're gonna, make them more competitive. And so yeah,
Hmm.
late April, that the Calais decision comes down, and wouldn't you know it, a
Yep.
week later. The House is amending the sine die resolution.
Hmm.
And for those unfamiliar with what a sine die resolution is, it is a set of rules that comes with adjourning for the year, right? And they amended it to include that they could come back to talk about redistricting. So I think I'm explaining that
Yes.
correctly. Okay, good. Um, but they amended it to include that they could come back from redistricting. So they were going to adjourn sine die on May 14th, but they wanted to reserve the right to come back to discuss this legislation. So that happens in the House May 6th, and then it's sent back over to the Senate
Hmm.
so that they can consider it. Um, so I want to make sure I highlight here. Lynn, you mentioned South Carolina was under a lot of political pressure.
Yes.
A lot of southern states were um, following that decision because President Trump, who has never been vague about his intentions about anything,
Hmm.
Katie opinion, um, basically started pressuring all these southern states to redistrict. And this was no different.
Right.
I have this tweet here. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Truth Social post. Here, this is before the Senate was about to vote
Hmm.
on the sine die amendment. But before that, the House is starting to move its redistricting bills,
Hmm.
right? On a Friday, no less.
Right. They almost never meet on a Friday. In fact, I talked to legislators who've been around for decades who said they couldn't recall. But they called a meeting, a subcommittee meeting to hear redistricting, again, a map drawn in Washington
Mm.
on May 8th in the House. And, it was even worse. The map was even worse than the previous iteration. To the dismay of many, it would have included USC and Clemson in the
Yeah.
same district. But
That's how you
all
know South Carolinian didn't try.
right, but those of us right here in Central Columbia would have been in the same district with Oconee up
Hmm.
in the extreme northwest. Very bad map in terms of our traditional criteria to protect communities' voices. But it was heard, and the House was passing these things
Oh yeah.
and passed it out of subcommittee and committee very quickly.
Yes. And on the same day they're doing that, though, they pass it out of full on
Hmm.
May 12th, while the Senate is voting on this resolution for the sine die amendment, and they shoot it down.
Right.
Um,
It,
Tell us
it
about that.
requires two-thirds of the
Hmm.
Senate to amend the sine die resolution.
Hmm.
This is, an ordinary bill. Once it gets to the floor, it's simple majority. Once
Hmm.
it's actually up for what's called second hearing, it only takes a simple majority. But to amend a sine die resolution, that is a two-thirds. And in fact, rules played a huge role in what happened in
Hmm.
this case. When the House took it up on the floor,
Hmm.
um, and It was voted out of full committee to the floor on May 12th,
Mm-hmm.
and the opponents of the bill let it be known that they had over 500 amendments they wanted to offer.
Mm-hmm.
This did not please folks who wanted to pass this bill because, of course, you're running out the clock. This
Mm-hmm.
whole process is taking place against the background that early voting
Yeah.
was going to begin. The early voting date for the primary was beginning very shortly. The primary itself is June 9th.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone realized that just in practical terms, you can't just throw out tens of thousands of people's congressional votes.
Right.
So, so they had an immediate meeting of the Rules Committee of the House,
They did.
and in the House, the Rules Committee could alter rules um, without going to the full floor, and they voted to amend the rules to prevent those 500 amendments. The League of Women Voters went to court for an injunction against that rules change as a violation of the FOIA law, the Freedom of Information Act, because it was 8 minutes notice, public notice, before the meeting was held. Um,
They posted that notice at 7:07 p.m. and then they met at 7:15.
right, which
Not enough time.
not enough time. Now, having been at the State House for 14 years, I know that generally speaking, the General Assembly recognizes that they're subject to FOIA except on things like work products and process. But their legal argument was they were not subject to FOIA at all,
Mm-hmm.
and they argued for a very broad exemption of the legislature from law. In any case, the immediate ruling from Judge Coble in Columbia was that not to give the injunction, and so they went ahead and sent their bills over to the Senate.
They certainly did. They certainly did. So May 20th, that bill passes the House, and I have them on the same day here,
Mhm.
on sort of a technicality, right? Because they did it after midnight on
Yes,
May 20th,
yes,
very late night. Um, and then that afternoon at 2 p.m., it is at the Senate Full Judiciary where they're hearing testimony.
right.
And that was a late meeting too, till about 10-ish, I think.
Well, not quite that late,
No?
but well, almost though.
Yeah,
Yeah, about 10. Testimony went on for hours. In spite
mhm,
of the short notice, the League, WREN, and others got out a very good turnout of concerned public because people realized this was all very bad.
mhm.
Um, Testimony went on till about 7 p.m., I think. I
Yeah,
think I testified after 6.
yeah,
And
yeah.
um,
It
so,
was,
but they went ahead and passed it out to the floor with a favorable recommendation.
so then the next day they get on the Senate floor and that's when the debate begins.
Right.
Um, can you talk a little bit about the Senate floor debate and like we're gonna talk about what it culminated in, right?
Hmm.
Anything unusual about it?
Oh, there was a lot that was unusual about it.
Right.
The Senate rules are very complex, but there are special rules for redistricting.
Hmm.
And it takes, first reading is when a bill appears in the Senate.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's when the House first sent it over.
Hmm.
Second reading is the first vote that's taken, but that for redistricting, it has to be at least 2 days after the first reading. And then third reading, which is essential to pass the bill, must be at least 2 days after second reading.
Hmm.
Okay, unlike the House, the Senate Rules Committee alone would not just meet on no notice and change this. I think it's questionable whether they would have agreed to do it anyway, but they couldn't,
Hmm.
to waive those rules, because if it played out that way, if there was 2 days elapsed and then another 2 days, we were already into in-person early voting, tens of thousands of votes being cast. And we had remarkable events like Senate Majority Leader Shane Massey gave a brilliant speech
Hmm.
against the redistricting. Um, Now, Shane Massey is a very
Hmm.
conservative Republican leader, um, but he raised many objections. And ultimately, as we went in even to the early voting period, and as it turns out, uh, we even had Senator Richard Cash, who is among the most conservative and certainly on issues of social importance.
Hmm.
Um, saying on the Senate floor, neither my conscience nor my common sense will allow me to stop an election that is already underway. So that was what really finally killed it.
Yeah.
Um, the votes, there were Republicans, all of the Democrats, and a number of principal, in fact, very senior Republican leaders in the Senate were opposed to doing this for a number of reasons. But ultimately, they brought others onto their side, including Senator Cash, for example,
Hmm.
when it hit the day that early voting was happening. And everyone could see videos were being posted online of long lines of thousands of people signed up to vote the first day.
It was a very proud day to be a
It
South
was, it
Carolinian.
was. Tens
Um,
of thousands of people turned out to vote early enough to make it clear that they did not want this to happen.
right. And so I wanted to highlight here too, 12 working days.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, I
that's
believe
insane.
that's insane. This session has been full of what feels like fast legislation popping up,
Hmm.
whack-a-mole. But 12 working days to redistrict our entire state
Yeah,
is wild.
right,
And we are happy with the Senate for doing the right thing. Because I believe it's like a whole year process, you know.
right.
So you mentioned the voter turnout. Um, 58,000
Hmm.
South Carolinians voted on that first day of early voting.
Right.
For some context, I guess, the last like record final voting day was 23,000.
Hmm.
So blew it out of the water.
Yes.
Very cool.
Right. Very often primaries altogether turn out no more than 15 or 17% of the electorate. This primary, in part because of this, brought out 25% of the registered voters, which is much less than it should be 100%, but it's way better than normal.
Right. No, South Carolinians showed out.
Yeah, they did.
And this is just kind of a
We
recap.
did.
Yeah, we did. I have a sticker to prove it. I
Yeah.
framed it.
Hmm.
Um, because I'm sentimental like that. But this is just sort of a recap of what you've said. The rules failed. The effort, the rules they didn't fail.
Yeah, they would have, the minute that they passed, that they brought up the attempt to change that rule.
Mhm.
And that would have required on the floor of the Senate a three-fifths vote. When that failed, and they tried twice, they failed both times. When that failed, it was clear that they could not possibly pass this before early voting in person had started.
Perfect.
Yeah,
It was a beautiful concoction.
yeah, it
Um,
was a happy moment.
yes, for sure. The energy was good in the State House lobby that
It
day.
was, it was.
Um, but these are some of the arguments
Hmm.
we heard throughout this whole thing, right? Um, I heard a lot of the "we are a red state"
Yeah.
versus the representative
Right.
democracy.
The far right was arguing, we're a red state, so, we should have our entire congressional delegation should be red,
Hmm.
Republican. Um, that is, in fact, not how the House of Representatives is supposed to be constituted.
Right.
You have a Senate that is voted for statewide to go to Congress. Um, so that's you. If you have a majority statewide, yeah, you are very likely to take both Senate seats. But that is the House exists for very different reasons, explicitly to reflect the actual population and its interest, and not to be winner take all. Um, but other concerns were raised that were really important to legislators in not passing this. One was South Carolina needs someone in both parties in Congress because at times um, who is in charge up there in DC changes. And how is South Carolina going to have a strong voice if it has no one in Congress representing the party that is then in charge in DC?
Hmm.
Unintended consequences. Here we again have the problem that people do not pack up and move to the Caribbean to work on their tan if they get moved out of a district.
Right.
They get moved into an adjacent district
Yeah.
where they are still going to keep voting for the people they believe will represent their interest, making it harder for the people in the adjacent district to win their campaign. In short, we're back to what happened in February with a concern about, are you going to have more competitive districts? And to be clear, the League of Women Voters loves congressional districts that are competitive. Any kind of district is competitive if it is in fact rationally drawn in compliance with the criteria of representing communities and so forth. This was not. This was definitely not. In fact, the map was drawn so badly, and of course it's old data. They drew lines, people looking at the map in detail saw that they drew lines through individual houses so that someone in the kitchen would be in a different district than somebody in the bedroom. But anyway, unintended consequences, making districts they didn't want to be. Leadership did not want to have competitive
Right.
2 or 5 or whatever.
Yeah.
So they didn't want that. And then Shane Massey, Senator Massey, said that South Carolina, in his floor speech, said, South Carolina actually needs a healthy, viable minority party for accountability, to have ideas debated openly and freely. And it was such an exceptional speech, by the way, that it made it to the New York Times.
It was a really good speech.
It was a really good speech. I've
Yeah.
never heard the lobby get so quiet
Oh, yeah.
listening to that. And so even, there are people that our organizations are often not on the same page with, but that came through with principled, rational positions in this case that we have to appreciate because
Absolutely.
it's often said, and I think people have sometimes trouble believing this, but it's true. There are no permanent friends, no permanent enemies at the State House.
Yeah.
You work with the people who are willing to work with you on the issues.
Yeah, no, you're right. And that's something when I'm talking to my friends too, or like how do you do? I was like, there's no permanent friends, there's no permanent enemies. That's a
And
good way to put it.
right, and mutual respect for that
Right.
is essential.
Yeah. Um, Very interesting to see all of these play out and then tie in together because then the ones that are like, we are a red state, but oh no, we might not be
Yeah.
if we do it like this. Very interesting. So what do we learn about through this whole thing?
Oh, I really hope voters learn that they have more power than they think they do.
Yeah.
And I want to say about gerrymandering in general that all of it is based on history. People are using figures from what happened in the past, who voted in the past, and we know that turnout is often low in South Carolina, which means it is in many districts, not all. Some districts are so lopsided that not much is going to happen. But there are many districts in which voters could surprise the people drawing the maps.
Yeah.
If they show up in reasonable, eligible, truly eligible voters, show up and vote their own interest, you have a lot of power to overcome the expectations of the map drawers. But in this case, what we learned is community power exists in this earlier stage of just whether the map gets drawn.
Right.
People showed up. They showed up by the tens of thousands to huge lines of voters at the voting places. And I will say, having been in one of those lines is just a very wonderful spirit from people in both who were planning to vote in the primaries for both parties.
Yeah.
Everyone felt good about seeing voters really energized and engaged.
It was a really good, just like everyone was like so happy to be doing it. And I feel like, I haven't voted a lot. I mean, I have, but like I'm not very old. I haven't been in a lot of elections. But this one was so like, I was talking to people in line. I feel like sometimes it feels like the DMV in the lines where you're like, well, I just gotta wait to do it. But yeah, everyone was, really excited to do their part on this. And I want to highlight our two team members who sent us lovely pictures. The lovely Aisha Jones, and then of course our Zoom bouncer, Brianna.
Yes.
So it was a really, really proud day in South Carolina.
It was.
And if your right to vote didn't matter, they wouldn't be trying to take it. So
that's right. We have to keep reminding people they wouldn't be trying to take your vote away, to make it mean less if it didn't mean a lot already.
Yeah.
Use it. You have to use it.
And so we want to look ahead.
Yeah, redistricting isn't over. We have already heard legislators say that they expect to bring it up again in the 2027 session. Again, midterm redistricting between the censuses is uncommon. It's not what should be happening. but it isn't prohibited anywhere. So we're going to be fighting this again, and we expect that it will not just be the congressional map. We expect it will include the South Carolina House and Senate. And in those cases, we are not backed up by existing federal court decisions
Mm.
about how the districts were drawn. So there's that, plus we won't be under the extremely tight time constraints that worked to our advantage in killing this time. They're going to have plenty of time when they come back.
And they know they need it.
Right.
Yeah.
So all sorts of things are changing. We know that leadership is changing in both houses of the legislature, or at least one.
Yeah.
With Davy Hyatt's
Retirement.
in the House.
Mhm.
So the majority leader in the House is retiring, will be replaced. We're not sure by whom.
And then also midterms.
Midterms, the legislature will change with the November election, and then there could be further court decisions that shape this. So it isn't over. And no matter what happens in 2027, we are already very close to the 2030 census,
Mm-hmm.
when you can expect to hear from all of us about people actually responding to the census. Because we know that one of the problems that we had in this current map is that rural areas and high poverty areas were really underreported. The census became very dependent on the internet, which not everybody has access to.
Right.
And a lot of folks weren't counted who should have been counted. And that led to distortions of the map. But the census figures are what rules in court.
Right.
So just saying, well, we think it's wrong is not going to get you anywhere.
Right.
So anyway, we know that we're going to be back on this in 2027. We expect to be trying to communicate with everyone in the state about this.
Yeah.
Leading into 2027 and during the session. And we really hope that the energy we saw come through so wonderfully this time will continue.
Yeah, and that's just to hammer home these like your voice matters. And when this inevitably rears its ugly head again, stay informed. I know both the league and WREN will be blasting that information. Speak up where you can and where you feel comfortable. If you feel comfortable going to those public hearings and sharing your opinion on whatever map they show us, we would love for you to do it. And of course, always, please vote.
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 Vote every time in every election.
Whenever you can.
Yes, the fact that so many people turn out for presidential general elections and not for these very important primaries and local government and state government elections is one of the most harmful things to representative democracy. Vote in every election that you're eligible for.
And I think we kind of touched on it. So just
Yeah.
how you can help build the community, share your story,
Right.
bring a friend. You could be like Lynn in this picture, and she's testifying. We have an action center on the WREN website. So it's looking a little bare right now because it's special session, but in the full session, we have a bunch of different ways that you can contact your legislator. You can share our posts, both the leagues and the WRENs on social media. And then also I mentioned the beautiful Aisha Jones, who does trainings and webinars and workshops. And I know the league also does.
Oh, yeah, we're doing,
Yeah.
and we would expect to do more webinars and workshops on this issue as we move forward. The League of Women Voters website, lwvsc.org, includes a lot of information. And right now you can go there, and if you look under legislative advocacy, you can see the testimony that we gave at every stage of this process in 2026. And as well as read about our overall positions.
And that, speaking of the league and the cool resources you can get, they also
Yes,
run the Vote 411.
which is a really remarkable, I know there are others who try to do something along these lines, but Vote 411 is perhaps the best known in the entire country as a free, nonpartisan voter guide. And in keeping with that nonpartisanship, we present statements responses to questions by the candidates that are completely unedited. We do not in any way try to slant that. You can go there and get links to check your voter registration status. You can see your ballot, compare candidate responses side by side, find where you need to go, and create a personalized sample that you can print out and take with you.
If you have a question about voting at any point, vote 411. The personalized ballot was really helpful. And also seeing side by side
Yes.
people saying things, especially when you're looking at your own party as well, like especially when you're like, what are the differences between, because fundamentally we're probably the same.
And failure to respond to something as well established and nationally and in South Carolina's Vote 411, when you see a candidate not answering questions,
Mhm.
that should tell you something too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. So, these are all the resources here. They're linked on here, but you guys can't link them. So, Bree has those actual links. And we are at 2 o'clock, but I do want to give just like a little bit of time for questions. Bree, do we have any questions?
I don't have any on my end. No one's put it in the chat or anything. So
Okay, well, perfect. Great. Well, if you guys think of any questions, feel free to reach out to info@scren.org, and we'll make sure it gets answered. Um, but I just want to say again, thank you to
Mhm.
Lynn for being here and all of your knowledge. I'm going to embarrass you just like a little, and I'm going to say, as a young woman starting in the lobby, you are so cool to work with. And I learn a lot from you. So thanks for sharing that
Oh, and
with
I love working with you. It's
and
great.
well, everyone, I hope you have a great afternoon. And if you're in South Carolina, stay cool. It's melty out there.
It is.
All right. Bye, y'all.